Well, welcome everyone. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon. And in case you're not sure which webinar you logged in, because we've all got a couple hundred that we're on at this point. This is the Lincoln Public Library's live virtual author visit with bestselling author Mary Kubica. And we're so excited to have you with us, Mary. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the, surprising, kind of amazing things that we have with COVID, which has had so many terrible things, is we get the chance to talk with you, and you're all the way out in Chicago, correct?
I am, yeah, and I agree. It is one of the nice things that has kind of arisen out of COVID is just being able to do so many virtual events like this and be able to chat with people all the way in California, which I probably wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So I'm really excited to join you today.
We appreciate it very, very much. So for any of our attendees who have not been to one of our virtual author events before, my name is Kathryn Hunt. I'm the director of the Lincoln Public Library, if you don't know me. And the format for today is basically going to be that Mary and I are going to have a conversation about her work, about the practice of being a writer, and some other fun questions. And then we will have a time for question and answer. So if you have questions, please drop them into the Q&A box on your Zoom window. It's easiest if you do it in Q&A. That helps me keep track of them. It lets us get through the most questions the fastest. If you're not able to type in your questions, we will have some time at the end for you to connect via audio. So at that point, we'll just ask you to raise your hand. That's an option over if you see your name or down at the bottom of your screen. And at that point, I will turn on your connection so that you can speak, and we can do the questions that way. But we will go through the Q&A questions first because we can get through those the fastest. So now Mary is a fantastic author of a number of the most popular thrillers at the Lincoln Public Library. I have seen her debut novel, The Good Girl, in and out of the circulation desk and our book drops constantly for 6 years. Mary, your novels span actually the exact length of time I've been with the Lincoln Public Library. The Good Girl came out just as I got hired here.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So it's this lovely bookend so far. And so now from the outside, The Good Girl really kind of came on the scene. It's your debut novel with a major publisher. Were you writing a lot before that novel, or was this really just the story that came out of you that also caught fire?
Yeah, I had been writing since I was like 11 years old, or, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but in my memories, I was probably in middle school sometime. It was just one of those things that I started doing when I was young. And, I just loved creating these fictional characters and fictional worlds and kind of living vicariously through them. But it was never anything that I thought I wanted to ever pursue professionally. Writing was just one of those things that I did in my free time. Career-wise, I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher. So I went that route, became a high school history teacher, and I taught for a number of years. But I was writing all the time in the background, just whenever I had some free time, I always had some kind of story going. But the first thing that I actually finished was The Good Girl. So I started writing that right after my daughter was born. She's 15 now. So it was back in 2005. I started writing it, and when I started it, it was really like anything that I had written in the years prior, But I kind of quickly fell in love with the characters in the story in a way that I just really hadn't anything else. I just really felt captivated by this book. And it was the first thing that I felt like I had to finish, and when I did finish it 5 years later, I had that urge to see, if I could do anything with it, if I could try and get it published. I had written The Good Girl totally in secrecy. I was always pretty shy about my writing. It was one of those things that, was private. I did it for myself. I didn't really share with a lot of people. So I wrote The Good Girl totally in secrecy. Only my husband knew that I was working on it, but I wouldn't let him read it. And then even when it was all done, I didn't let him read it before I started sending it out to these literary agents. So I had gotten my hands on a book called The Writer's Market, and it lists literary agents in there and how to go about contacting them. And so I had gone through and found a big number of agents, like 75-ish, that represented women's fiction, psychological fiction, just that kind of thing. And I wrote up a query letter and started sending the query letter out to them. And some of the agents did ask to read some of the novel. There were actually 3 agents that asked to read all of it. And in the end, though, every single one of these agents that I sent the good girl to passed on it. Nobody wanted it. And, I was sad for sure. I felt like I had just kind of put my everything into that book. But I think I was also not totally surprised, just because I knew that, cracking into the publishing industry was not going to be easy. It wasn't something that I had studied in college. I had always been, a little just unsure of my writing. I hadn't shared it with other people because I didn't know if it was any good. And I was always so nervous to find out. So I think that was kind of the expected outcome too, was that this was going to happen. They were going to pass on it. So I moved on. I started writing some other things. What they are or where they are, I have no idea, because they're just nothing that grabbed me like The Good Girl had. And then 2 years after that final rejection from the agents, one of them actually reached back out to me to see if the book was available, if I was being represented. And it just so happened that the first time I sent her The Good Girl, she was right out of college, brand new to this literary agency. And she was working as an assistant agent for somebody else. So she read the book, she loved the book, but she just didn't have the authority to take it on. And the rest of her team decided to pass. So she had passed on their behalf. Well, within those next 2 years, she was promoted to an actual agent, and she was she was in a position to take on her own clients. And she remembered The Good Girl for those 2 years, reached back out to me. And, it was, she wanted to represent me in the book. And it was really a dream come true. I mean, I felt like in retrospect, it was the best way it could have happened, because she just was so passionate about that book. For her to remember it for 2 years, that meant so much to me. So she and I worked together for a number of months, kind of cleaned up the book a little. Again, like nobody had laid eyes on it before I had sent it out to agents. So just got it in the best shape we possibly could. And then this was back in 2012 at this point. So by the end of the year, she was sending it out to publishers, and that's how it all got started.
Oh, that's exciting. And that is great with that it struck her and stuck with her so much, because that's also how you described your experience of writing it, that, you'd written a lot of pieces, but this story really kept after you. And so you got it done.
It did, and I think it's the book. It took 5 years to write. And every other book of mine has been about a book a year. And so I think just spending 5 years with those characters in your head, and I was thinking about them. I was dreaming about these characters. I just, could not get them off my mind. And so I think that was part of it too, is just, I had formed such a relationship to these characters. And so I don't know, but yeah, it's a fun story to share, because I know that a lot of times in events like this, there are aspiring authors out there. And so I think it's something that's really good to remember. Timing is important. And sometimes you just have to kind of keep going until you find that one person that's as passionate about your work as you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the 5 laws of librarianship is every book its reader. And it's the idea that every story has the person or the people who are meant to read it. And it's okay if not everyone is that book's reader, but every book has its reader, and your book had its agent to get started.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good way of saying it.
So with that, you said this one took 5 years. Now, obviously, part of that was because you were writing part-time around the time. Were you teaching?
So I was not teaching. I had stopped teaching right before my daughter was born, but I had one, and then shortly after 2 little ones at home. So, I mean, I was literally writing from my daughter from the time she was born until she was 5. And, my son is 2 years younger. So a lot of it was, at nap time or, and just like hoping and praying I could get the two of them to nap at the same time so that I could have that little chunk of time in the middle of the day to do it. So my days really didn't belong to me at that point in my life. So it was definitely hard to find the time. So which is why I think that it took longer, but they were just, those characters were always in my head, whether or not I was actively writing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being a full-time parent is, a 36-hour-a-day job. So right. Absolutely. And having the energy to keep track of all of the twists and turns. Yeah. Something we talked a little bit about before we got live, but all of your novels are known for having so many twists and being so surprising in different places. And I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you build those surprises and what you keep in mind as you're trying to kind of surprise and maybe shock your readers.
Yeah. So among author circles, we always refer to ourselves as either plotters or pantsers. So a plotter plots, obviously, and then a pantser likes to fly by the seat of their pants. And that is me. So there is thought that goes into these books, but there's not a whole lot of, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about where the story is going to go before I actually start writing it. And it has varied from story to story. I won't give any spoilers away here, but with The Other Misses, my last book, I did know the ending first. But with many of my other books, I had no idea. I started the book with just kind of this mystery that needed to be solved. And I actually had no idea, like in The Good Girl, for example, there's a big twist there. And I had no idea that was going to happen when I was writing the book, until I got like 3/4 of the way through the novel and thought, oh, what if this happens? And for me as a writer, I think that is like the most exciting point of the writing process is, I'm writing and then that twist just kind of comes into view. And I know that all these pieces are going to go together. But we were talking before we got on here about how it is difficult for a suspense author to kind of find that line between giving too much away and kind of not giving enough away, because you want the reader to get to the end and, see that big twist and have that moment of kind of shock, but also be able to, say, yeah, now I see it, or maybe to read the book a second time and be able to see all those little breadcrumbs leading you right to the big twist. So it's definitely a delicate balance to find that, but I love it. And sometimes once I think of the twist, then I'm able to jump back into the manuscript and sort of lay that trail delicately down for the reader.
Absolutely. Yeah. And well, it's interesting when you say kind of like with The Good Girl coming across the twist, because I feel like as difficult as that is, because you can't predict it and you probably are going back and cleaning up all those breadcrumbs, you're kind of coming across that twist organically as well from what's in the novel. So that's got to feel very authentic to the readers that it makes sense that twist happened.
Right. And I think so. I think, yeah, because I think that if I feel it, then the reader will feel it. And writing The Other Misses, because I did know the twist, that was a totally different experience, because instead of, trying to solve it myself during the process, I was working up to kind of a finish line I had already created.
And were both of those really rewarding ways to work, or is there one that you prefer as an author?
That's, I have to say, I think I prefer not knowing the twist, even though it comes with a lot of anxiety. I may get halfway into the book and think, I have no idea where this is going, or, will all these pieces come together? I don't know. So that can definitely be anxiety inducing, but I think that also, gets the adrenaline going too, and makes my brain try and, keep thinking and thinking creatively and thinking out of the box and all that. So that definitely adds to the fun.
Absolutely. Have you ever managed to kind of write yourself into a corner or a dead end and have to really work back or just lose parts of your manuscript?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, I would be lying if I said no, but it happens. I feel like it happens pretty frequently. And I think that it's part of being a pantser, you know, because sometimes I'll start this storyline that seems great, but doesn't work on paper. And so, you know, because I haven't thought it all out in advance, and I don't know what the big picture is going to be. So it's always frustrating, you know, when you spend days or weeks writing all these words that you ultimately delete. It's hard just because you think of the wasted time, but I think it's never really wasted. You know, some of that is material I can use later. I can save and draw from it on another book, or sometimes it's just the process of figuring out who these characters are. I know right now I'm working on another book, and I was just thinking today how I'm like living in the movie Groundhog Day, because I think I have rewritten the same 1,000 words every day for the last 2 weeks because I just can't get them right. So there are definitely moments like that in the process.
Absolutely. So like with that, do you tend to write your novels kind of straight from beginning to end, or do you jump around into scenes that you know want to be there, or kind of bugs that you have that you know you want to include in the story?
Yeah, you know, I've changed a little bit how I write with each book, I would say. The one thing that I've always done, though, is all my books have multiple narrators. And so I actually take one of those narrators and I tell that person's story from beginning to end. And then I'll jump back and pick another narrator and do their whole story. So with The Other Misses, for example, we hear from a woman named Sadie, a woman named Camille, and a little girl named Mouse. So I wrote all of Sadie's storyline from beginning to end, and then all of Camille's storyline from beginning to end. And then I went back up and finished with Mouse. And then I literally like print these out and shuffle them together like a deck of cards. And I always have to move some things around because, you know, just twists might be being revealed at the wrong point and things like that. But that way, I just feel like I can stay true to the one plot line, and I can get the character's voice as authentic as possible when I'm not jumping back and forth between narrators. So that's one trick that I've done for all of my books. But it used to be early on that, you know, I had to finish one chapter, I had to edit that chapter, I had to feel really good about that chapter before I felt comfortable moving on to the next. And now I've let go of that a little bit. You know, I've started to realize that I just have to get it all out, and then I can go back and revise later. So I'm a little bit more flexible there. And I have just in the last maybe year or so, I have started, if I get an idea for, you know, a scene 3 chapters later and it's really talking to me, I will jump ahead and write it, you know. So I've gotten to the point that I will do things like that, leave gaps that I can fill in later, just because I think that if I'm excited about something, I should get it down on paper while it's fresh.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rather than letting it sit there while you try and get through those 1,000 words of Groundhog Day. So now you did mention that you do about a book a year at this point, which is incredible pace as someone who's now 30 odd years in and hasn't written one yet. But can you tell us a little bit about kind of your process for writing the book in terms of time, like how to get a book out, you know, in just about a year? Are you writing large portions of every day? Do you go to a cabin and write the whole thing in 4 weeks?
I wish. I'd like to go to a cabin. I know I write a little bit every day, I would say. And I wake up at 5 every day, and I will write then. It was something that I got in the routine doing when I had just sold The Good Girl, and then my second book, Pretty Baby, was already under contract with a deadline, and my kids were still very young. My daughter, I think, was maybe in kindergarten at that point, but my son went to preschool like 2 afternoons a week. So I had maybe 4 hours to myself a week, you know, if I was lucky. So it was difficult to find the time to write a book. That was under deadline. You know, I couldn't write it at my leisure like I had The Good Girl. So I started getting up at 5 every day, and I'd write from like 5 to 7 until the kids were up. And most days that was it for the writing. But I found that I just loved it. At 5 in the morning, my brain is pretty fresh. There's not much else you're going to do at 5 in the morning. You know, it's too early for laundry and errands and that kind of thing. So still, you know, now they're 13 and 15, my kids, and I'm still up at 5 every day, and it is still my favorite time to write. So I usually I aim for about 1,000 words a day. It doesn't always happen. I don't hold myself to it. If I'm not having a productive day, that's fine, because some other day might be super productive, but I'll aim for about 1,000 words a day. And so usually I probably don't write all 7 days a week. It's my goal, but it's probably more like 5. And then, it takes me, I guess I would say like 7 to 8 months to have a draft that I feel confident enough to share with my editor. And then I'll share it with her, and she and I'll spend the next few months going back and forth and just cleaning it up and making it the best that it can be. But then I am actually usually done with my books a year plus before they come out. So I have a book that's coming out in May called Local Woman Missing, and I haven't touched it since at least last April of 2020. So there's definitely a big gap in there, where it gets a cover and early publicity, and the publisher makes advanced copies that get sent out to booksellers and librarians and bloggers and that kind of thing to just start creating some buzz. So it's always a fun time. It's a nerve-wracking time, not knowing, how people are going to take to a new book, but it's always exciting.
Absolutely. So, you've mentioned that you really live in your characters' heads as you write these stories. How does it feel then to have that year gap, and then all of a sudden the book comes out and now everyone's asking you about this story and these characters that, you've been living in some other characters' heads now?
Yeah.
That's exactly 9 months.
It's hard because maybe not with every book, but almost every book I've written a whole book, in there. And so you're right. I'm totally invested in these new characters. And so often it's hard for a writer to read their own book once it's done. Once I can't make any more changes to it, it's hard. But there are times like if a new book is coming out, and I'm going to be doing a number of book clubs, especially just because, they get into the details. Very awkward when I can't remember. So I will sometimes have to reread it, or, at least hit the high points before I feel comfortable talking about it in that much depth.
Absolutely. Does the time and the distance also make it a little bit easier to hear other people's kind of interpretations of your work?
It does. Yeah, it does. And especially I think too, when I get a sense, I do sometimes look at my reviews. It's one of those things that, like right now I'm looking for Local Woman Missing just because I want to know it's a new book and I want to know if readers are going to like it. At some point, I will stop. But it's, when I know that readers are really enjoying a book, or, they were totally surprised by the twist and things like that, then it's such a wonderful feeling, and it does make it a lot easier to talk about.
Absolutely. Not quite as close, because now you've
Right.
got a new book that you've been working in. Yeah. So now you're trained as a historian, and we're teaching history, correct?
Correct.
But you write extremely contemporary suspense novels.
Yes.
So not that everyone who does history has to go into historical fiction, but did you specifically kind of move away from historical settings because you were doing that for so long? Or what's the relationship between kind of those two passions of yours?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always say that it's kind of on my bucket list to write a historical fiction novel one day. And I love to read historical fiction. But I'm intimidated by it. And in all honesty, with the books that I write, I get to make 90% of it up. And, I do some research to fill in the gaps of knowledge that I have with it. But with historical fiction, these books and these authors, they just completely transport you as a reader to some other time and place. And I did try. There was one of my books that I tried to set, not super historical, just in like the 70s or 80s, I can't remember, of which I lived through. But I noticed that as I was writing, there were so many details that just kept pulling. I like to lose myself in the manuscript, I think, when I write. And there were so many details that just kept pulling me away, and it was small things like, exactly what were the houses like, and what kind of cars were people driving, and what did a coffee maker look like, and just all those little details that I felt like I kept having to go research. And it's just a 2-second Google search, but I just felt like it kind of kept pulling me away from my characters and my story. And so I struggled with that. But I've always loved to read suspense novels. It's the kind of thing that I gravitate towards on TV or when I go to the movies. So I think that that's sort of, what drew me to the genre to write. It was also a little bit by accident. Before The Good Girl, most things I was writing were general women's fiction. I would say they didn't have those twisty elements. And then I was writing The Good Girl, that it was totally by accident that it happens. I thought I was writing this kind of different love story. And then, I thought, oh, well, what if this happens? And what if I do this? And, little by little, it turns into a totally different book. But I was just sort of drawn to that genre and that style of writing. And I just love it. So I think one day, maybe I would try historical fiction. I think I need to be on a different schedule, though, where I can really slow down my pace to do the research right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that with other authors that I've spoken with, that tension of the research, but also then not researching so much that your novel becomes a historical report of the time period, and balancing all that. It's a delicate balance, and it's definitely a lot of work, especially when you've done history, like, all of the little details and all the tells that could be there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So now, let's see. So now, talking a little bit about you. So when you're not writing, what is it that you do besides, hanging at home with COVID, as we all are at this point?
Sometimes. I have volunteered in an animal shelter for about 10 years now, which I love. I haven't been able to be there, though, because of COVID. So the shelter is still operating, but they have a number of staff members. So they've actually closed the doors to volunteers and just have a small number of staff taking care of the animals. But in its place, we have my family has been fostering a lot more. So I was just counting the other day, but 10 cats and kittens have come through my home's doors during COVID, which has been really fun to do. And it's really been nice to be able to open up our home to these animals and be able to kind of like do the animal shelter thing remotely. So I've enjoyed that. So I do that a lot. We have 2 fosters right now who are potentially going to get adopted this weekend. So we're crossing our fingers. And then I'm a big runner. I just ran my first marathon in October. So that was kind of a lifetime goal. I wasn't sure if I was ever going to get there. So I was really excited to be able to do it. That was virtual too. It was the Chicago Marathon, but we had to do it virtually. So I am actually registered for next year. So hopefully that one I'll get to be on the streets of Chicago for.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so exciting. Congratulations. 26.2 is no joke.
It is no joke. I've run for a long time. I started running when I was in middle school, and I love it, but I had never done, the really long distances. And in the last couple of years, I did a couple half marathons, and the last half marathon I had done went well. And, I'm not getting any younger. So I thought, it's now or never with the marathon. And so I, thought, what the heck? And I signed up for it. And the training was hard. It was difficult. It was incredibly time consuming, but I'm so glad I did it.
Oh, fantastic. And yeah, so are all of your foster animals cats? Are you a cat household?
They are. And I love dogs, though. I think that there's the misconception that I don't like dogs, or that I prefer cats, but we have cats of our own. We actually have 3 of our own cats. And the idea of adding a dog to the mix is just kind of insanity, I think. And my cats are all older, so I just can't imagine doing that. But I grew up with a dog. I absolutely adore dogs. So at some point in my life, there will be another dog.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. I am a cat and a dog person as well, but I'm with you. I have an 18-year-old cat, and she does not want a dog friend.
No way.
Like,
not
in her house.
Right. No,
right?
They want to be able to do their thing and not get followed around by a dog.
Yep. So I've got my family's dog, doesn't live in the same place with the cat, and that's my dog. But but that's great that you're doing that, particularly at this time, bringing everybody in. So now let's see. So with all of we're going to switch over to Q&A in just a little bit. We've got some questions coming in, but I want to talk a little bit on some of your pieces, some of your books have been optioned for TV adaptations, including one for Netflix.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So The Other Misses was optioned for a movie for Netflix. So that was very exciting. I was telling you before about how there's kind of that lag time from where I finish a book and it publishes. And it was in their last, I guess it was in 2008 then that it was, or 2018, I mean, that it was actually options. So they wanted to do a movie with it. No, not 2018, 2019, because it came out in 2020. They would like to make a movie with it for Netflix. And a wonderful screenwriter named Jack Thorne has written the screenplay already for it. And so they're in the process right now of looking for a director for it. So I'm very excited. I don't know when it'll be out. COVID kind of slowed a lot of things down, but it does seem like the film industry is starting to get up and running again. So I'm very excited about that. And I don't know about you, but I love Netflix. I love to, sit at home and stream movies and TV shows from my living room. So I'm really excited about that. And then my newest one, Local Women Missing, was just optioned for a TV series by Black Bear Pictures. So that's very new news. So I don't really have any details there, but I'm very excited about that too.
That's fantastic. So now with The Other Misses, have you had a chance to read the screenplay? I know that you don't get to do much once it becomes optioned. It's in the hands of other creatives, but
I have not read the screenplay yet. And I know, a lot of people will ask, am I nervous? How am I going to feel? Because we know inevitably changes will be made. I'm very curious to see how they're going to do certain things. But, I'm just really excited. I hope that it sort of brings more awareness to my books, that, people will know it's coming to be a movie, and that they'll go read the book, or they'll see the movie and then want to read the book after. So I'm just excited about that.
Do you have any mental casting picks?
I don't. So I'm terrible. I get asked that a lot, and I always draw a blank. I think that it's hard for me mentally because I sort of have an idea of these characters formed in my head. So it's hard to replace that image with somebody else. But no, so I don't have any dream casts. But I can't wait to see who they come up with.
Speaking with another author, and her response to that was like, I don't until someone says who they think should be cast, and then I know that that's not right.
That's so funny.
Well, that is very exciting. Hopefully that will go forward quickly. Obviously, there are any number of steps in between optioning and actually having it on the screen, but we are certainly excited to see what that adaptation might look like.
Me too.
And then, so now with publishing, what is something now that you've published 6 books are out? Another one is, it sounds like, pretty much done and ready to go through editing and all of that process. What is something about that process that you had no idea about until you went through it?
I mean, literally all of it. I just, I had no idea what I was getting into. And I don't know if, it's new for everybody, that gets into the industry, but I also hadn't studied creative writing. I didn't have any author friends, when I got into this. So I guess I didn't even have anyone to talk to when I was first getting started or before I got started. So, literally down to the point that when I sold my book, I thought it was done. I didn't realize that there would be months and months of editing. And I think title changes is another big one that kind of surprised me, is just when it comes to a title of a book, I always thought just the author came up with it, but it's a much bigger decision. There are many, many people involved in coming up with a title for a book. And where I'm concerned, usually my editor and I'll come up with a list of maybe 5 we like, we'll brainstorm dozens and then narrow it down to our top 5. And then it gets sent to sales and marketing and publicity and all sorts of people for a vote. So that was different for me. or book covers, just how many different versions of a cover you might see before you land on the final cover. And again, how many people are involved, just, you might think you have the perfect cover, but then somebody down the line is not a fan and it's back to the drawing board. So that's a process. I've learned, like, until it's online or even, on the store shelf, it might change. So there's just been so much, but I feel too, though, like I've been so fortunate to meet so many people, and especially so many authors during the process. And they're just the most supportive group. I think that before I got into this, I had expected there to be a lot of competition between writers, but there's not. The writers that I've met and gotten to know, they're just so supportive of one another, in person, on social media. We're always championing one another's books. And I think because writing is a very solitary thing, it's me and my characters talking to me in my head, and that's it. So to be able to go out and, say to another author, oh, I got this awful review, or, I can't figure out what to do here, or I don't think this book idea is going to work that I was so excited about, and just kind of share those more disappointing moments with somebody who really gets it. That's been something that surprised me, but that I've really appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's great that you found that community, because it absolutely can be, as an author, incredibly lonely, because most people, when they interact with this work that you've poured your heart and energy into, you're not around. Being a reader is a very internal, separate, time and space disconnected experience of someone's work.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I have gotten to visit a number of book clubs, which is always fun, just because that's a conversation you don't always get to have. Like when I do library events or bookstore events, it's we don't get into the details of the book, because of spoilers, of course. So the book clubs are fun too, to just, when people say, I never saw this coming, or I hated this character, and just to be able to really have those more in-depth conversations is very fun. Kind of brings it all full circle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now, what are one or a few of your favorite books? What's something that you've really enjoyed that you've read lately?
I have these back here. No. I think so this year, there are really so many, I have to say, but a couple this year that just really blew me away. Jennifer Hillier's Little Secrets is phenomenal. It's a thriller. It's about a young boy. He's 4 or 5, and he disappears. That's how the story starts. But the story takes this like totally different turn then, and it turns into this book I was completely not expecting. And it's dark and it's edgy, and I'm a slow reader, but this was like one of those books that I don't think I left the chair after I started reading it. Another one I love this year is Heather Gudenkauf's This Is How I Lied. Heather Gudenkauf is, she's a phenomenal writer. She has many books out. I love all of them. But this one, it just grabbed me. It's about a decades old murder that's unsolved, and a woman who is a friend of the girl who was killed all those years prior. She's now a detective, and she decides to reopen the case when some new evidence comes up, and it's so good. Again, it was very twisty, very edgy, with an ending I totally didn't see coming. So those are a couple from this year that I loved. But Wendy Walker, Kimberly McCreight, Jillian McMillan are just a few of my favorite suspense authors.
That's fantastic. Thank you for those recommendations.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think at this point, we've got some questions in our Q&A. We'll start going through those. So one of our attendees wants to know that, one, do you get ideas in the middle of the night? And if so, do you have to wake up and jot down notes, or do you just jump on the computer and start writing? Or do they all conveniently wait till 5 a.m.?
They never conveniently wait, but at midnight, sometimes I try and assure myself that they will, but they don't. So I will usually either, I have my phone usually right by my bed. So I'll just go in the notes section and jot something down, which is usually hysterical to read, at 5 a.m. again, then like, that is not such a good idea. Or, you know, I'll just see the note that I jotted down and think, you know, what was just the way that I wrote it, you know, it's kind of funny. But I will say every now and then, you know, just if I'm not sleeping well and an idea is speaking to me, I will get up and I will write in the middle of the night for a little bit, and then, you know, usually go back to bed. And I don't know what it is, but I'm really shocked sometimes by, you know, that actually some good stuff can come out of me at 3 a.m. And, you know, I'm like pleasantly surprised the next day when I go back and reread it, that it can be not terrible. So it kind of goes with that, how I like to write so much at 5 a.m. I think that my brain is not functioning as well, like after 10 a.m., but anytime before is good.
Just putting stuff together in really interesting ways.
Yeah, it must be, you know, like some part of my subconscious or something is taking over. I'm not sure.
So now, do you have any tips on coping with writer's block?
Yeah, you know, I feel like for me, it never helps to stare at the computer when I'm stuck. And I had said earlier that, you know, I kind of try and stick to 1,000-word limit, but that I don't hold myself to it, because there are days that it's just not working, you know, and I, you know, staring at a blank sheet of paper is only going to make me more frustrated, and I'm going to start to doubt myself and all that. So I think that the best advice I have is just pack it up for the day, put the computer away, go for a walk, do some laundry, whatever it is you need to do. Because if you're anything like me, your mind is always working, you know, and you're always trying to figure out those tricky issues. And so I tend to get those better ideas, you know, in the shower. It sounds so cliche, but it happens, in the middle of the night, or, you know, when I'm watching my kid play soccer, those kinds of things, I'll figure out that thing I've been stuck on. But if I'm really stuck, it's just one of those things that even after a couple of days of this, it's not passing, I will do kind of like I alluded to before, and just jump a scene ahead. You can come back and fill in those gaps later. You know, I've learned during the process of writing just to kind of ease up a little bit on that first draft. Just, I've got to get some words down. They don't have to be the best words in the world. I've got to get something down that I can revise and clean up later. So I've kind of given myself that freedom to just relax on the first draft. So those would kind of be some of my advice, some of my tips for writer's block.
I like that with just getting things down. One of the programs that we do here at the library that we support is National Novel Writing Month, which I don't know if you're super familiar with it, but that's the whole ethos. Get 50,000 words down. You can edit it later.
That's right. Yeah, they don't have to be good, you know, but if you have something there, then you can build from that. You can layer on top of that. You can, you know, make it so much better, but you just got to get that kind of those building blocks in place.
Yeah, you can't edit what you don't get written.
Right, exactly.
Then we have a question of, do you let anyone else read before you submit your manuscripts to your editor?
I do not. So no. So and it is, I will say, one of the things when people will ask, and I'll say how important it is to get other readers. So I definitely I kind of contradict myself here a little bit. I don't, because I've had the same editor for all of my books, and I just value her opinion so much, I think. And writing is such a subjective industry that I could share the same book with like 10 people, and they could give me 10 different ideas about it. And so it's hard from that point of view. You know, I think that I just like to get it to my editor to just start working on those revisions. I did do something with The Other Misses that I had never done before. Usually, literally the only people that ever lay eyes on it are my editor, my agent, and my husband before it's done. But with The Other Misses, so I had known the twist ahead of time, which I had told my editor as soon as I thought of the idea, I told it to her. So she always knew the twist, which made it very difficult for either of us to edit objectively, because we knew exactly where this book was going. And so after she and I had done all of our revisions, and, you know, the book was in the best shape we thought it could be, I'm actually in a book club myself. So I took like 6 or 7 of the ladies from my book club and asked them to read it and tell me what they thought. And it was so incredibly helpful, because they went went through and they would say, you know, on page 50, this is what I think is happening. And there was one person that actually knew on page 50 what was happening. And so, you know, I knew, there's something I have to get rid of on page 50 and, you know, pull back a little bit. So it was so incredibly helpful to have those eyes on it when it was still in, you know, a draft stage, when changes could still be made. So that was kind of a cool process. But I think that as the writer, you're so close to it that it helps immensely to get somebody else, whether it's a friend, an editor, a spouse, whoever, get somebody else to read it and let you know what's not working, which characters are too flat, you know, where is it kind of dragging and it needs some more action. Because I think as the author, you're too close and you can't see those mistakes that other readers can.
Absolutely. And I think with kind of the people and roles that you've named, one of the things that stood out to me was these are all people that know you and know your work. And, you know, these are not random advanced copy readers or something, you know, at this stage, it's people who know the kind of projects and books that you're working on and are helping make it be the best version of that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because when, you know, I have been asked, would I, you know, change my style of writing based on reviews that I might see on Goodreads and that kind of thing. And it would just be impossible. You're never going to please everybody. So to your point, you know, it's important when you're getting that kind of feedback for your work that you're drawing on people who know you and know your style of writing and kind of know what your goal is for this project.
Absolutely. So now, so far, all your books have been standalone novels. Have you ever thought of, or would you consider writing a series?
So I really haven't. I think that by the ends of my books that I've either killed a lot of people off or I've just messed with their lives so much that I just have to let them go. But I do sometimes think the only one that I sometimes play around with in my head is The Good Girl. There's a detective, Gabe Hoffman, and I think it would be fun to take him and do just not a series, but a spinoff where he, you know, is investigating some other crime and maybe some of the other characters could make an appearance, but it's not really about them. It's more his story. And that way the books could really be standalones too. They wouldn't have to be a series. You know, you could read them in either order, that kind of thing. So one day I know that he was one of my favorite characters when I was writing the book. He's a lot of readers' favorite characters. So I think it would be fun to revisit him.
Absolutely. But yeah, in a series, you really do have to build your plots a little bit differently to make sure that you have enough characters at the end of the book going and to feel authentic. You know, if you do too many things to the same group of people, it can feel a little removed from what is possible.
Right. Absolutely. I know. And I do see advantages to writing a series. I forget who I was talking to, but it was an author that writes series. And she was saying, you know, how it's so nice when she begins, you know, the second or third or fourth book in a series because she knows those characters. Whereas I always have to have that getting to know you period with all of my characters. She's able to move pretty seamlessly from one into the next and just keep going. So there's definitely advantages for that. And I'm sure for a reader as well, because they already have some comfort in these characters.
Absolutely. And some expectations of how, because, you know, in a series, it's not just the characters are always the same, but usually there's some similarity of tone or stakes or things like that. And knowing some of how the book's going to play out, yeah, it absolutely is a comfort. And it's why, you know, series are great and enjoyable, but they do different work than standalones. The stories function a little bit differently.
Yes.
And then we've got a question. Do you ever miss teaching?
I do. I miss teaching a lot. You know, I have to say it was one of those things that I stopped teaching to raise my family. And I always thought I would go back as soon as the kids were, you know, in school themselves. And then writing happened. You know, this was not something that I expected to happen in those years after. So I miss it a lot. I do get to go into high schools and talk to them about writing. There are actually a couple Chicago area high schools that actually their literature classes read The Good Girl. So then I'm able to go in and we're able to do more of a book club discussion of it, which is pretty cool. So I take any of those opportunities that I can get just to be able to be back in the classroom for a short while.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, and those students must really love that, because I think sometimes literature can sometimes be taught a little bit at a remove, not as many contemporary authors, much less authors who are willing to make the time to come in and,
right.
and engage directly.
Yeah. And for me to get the perspective, from a 17 or 16-year-old on the book, I mean, it's just the most cool experience. I love it.
Absolutely. Well, that looks like most of our questions through here. I think we've covered all of our questions through here. So I'm going to see real quick on our attendees if there's anybody who wants to raise their hand and ask a question that way. I don't see it, but I don't see any hands, but I'll keep an eye out for a second. And I guess one of my last questions for you, Mary, is just, we're coming into the holiday season and all of that. So as all literature lovers, what's one of the best ways that we could support authors like yourself or beginning authors?
Yeah, obviously buying somebody's book is very helpful, or getting it from the library. If you read a book that you love, tell people. Word of mouth, I think, I see it so often, but I really think it's like the most powerful marketing tool out there. So tell people that how much you liked it, post it on your social media. Leave reviews, Goodreads, Amazon, wherever you typically leave reviews. All of that just really helps spread the word and just create awareness. Most authors do have social media pages too. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So if you follow, your favorite authors on social media, then when they have a new book coming out, and you can kind of look forward to that and share that news with people
Fantastic. So yeah, and with that, we do have your books here at the library. So for any of our attendees, if you've not read one or any of Mary's books, you can get them from the library. We'll also, I know there was a question that came through. There'll also be a question about the authors that you mentioned and the books that you mentioned in this conversation. We'll have those thrown up on a list as well to borrow those, but you can also always purchase Mary's books either from your local bookstore or from Amazon, but I know your local bookstores would love to see you this season.
They need all the help they can get right now.
And Jeff Bezos is doing fine. But yeah, let's see. I see one more Q&A came through. And we did have a question if any of your works are on audio. And yes, I know. Are all of them? I know Sam just finished.
They all are. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They all are available.
Yeah. So all in audiobook. So if that's your preferred way to read, you can live in there. And I know Sam's one of our staff members here at the library, for anyone who doesn't know who I'm mentioning, highly recommends them in audio. That there are some great effects and really diving into the world and its spookiness with the audio. So those come highly recommended. And yeah, well, with that, I don't see any more hands. I don't see any more questions. So Mary, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it. I've had a wonderful time chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me and for the great questions, and to everybody who tunes in for this event.
Absolutely. Oh, wait, one more snuck in. Do you get any input on casting for your optioned?
I don't. No, I get updates, and I feel like that's about that's as involved as I am. But yeah, so we'll see. I'm super excited to see who they do pick.
That'll be fun. It's okay. You're writing new books. You've got plenty on your plate. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mary. If any of our attendees want to rewatch this or share this will be posted on YouTube and Facebook. And yeah, keep reading, pick up one of Mary's books, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, Mary.
Thank you. You too. Have a good night.